up this week on Talk with Audrey, Dr. Meena Seshamani, Director, Center for Medicare for the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, has information about everything we need to know about the Medicare open enrollment period. Dr. Seema Khosla, Medical Director of North Dakota Center for Sleep, and Dr. Miranda Chappel-Farley, a sleep researcher living with obstructive sleep apnea, talk with me about the personal, social, and mental health effects of obstructive sleep apnea. Robert Hartwig is a clinical associate professor of risk management, insurance, and finance in the Darla Moore School of Business at the University of South Carolina and director of the school's Center for Risk and Uncertainty Management. He joins me with information about third-party litigation funding and legal system abuse and why households and businesses are increasingly paying the price. And Axon Air Strategist Vern Sallee shares how drones are being used in police forces across the country. It's all coming up this week on Talk with Audrey. Insightful, intelligent, and inspiring conversations and information to help you improve the quality of your life. It's all about the business of living. I'll be right back after this. You're watching Talk with Audrey. Welcome back. Well, it is that time of the year, and more than 66 million people with Medicare can review their prescription drug and health options and make changes from October 15th through December 7th. Dr. Meena Seshamani is Director of the Center for Medicare for the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. She joins me now with everything we need to know about the Medicare open enrollment period. Welcome.
Great to be with you.
Thanks so much for joining me. Lots of news this year. Why is the open enrollment period important for people with Medicare?
Well, open enrollment is incredibly important because it is the time of year where people with Medicare can evaluate their options and pick what works best for them. You know, your health and financial needs can change each year, and the options that are available to you change each year. And this is particularly important this year, where there are some really exciting improvements to the Medicare program. So it's very important to take advantage of open enrollment to make sure that you are picking the option that works best for your health and financial needs.
Who can participate in this open enrollment period?
Open enrollment is for anybody with Medicare. So it's people age 65 and older, certain people under 65 who have disabilities, and people with end-stage renal disease.
So there's big news in 2025. Tell us about the Medicare program and some of the changes that people should know about.
Yes, it's a very exciting time in Medicare. Thanks to the prescription drug law, the Inflation Reduction Act. Starting January 1st, 2025, people with Medicare will not have to pay more than $2,000 in a calendar year for their covered prescription drugs. It's the first time ever in the history of the program that there has been a limit on what people pay out of pocket. But note that it's for covered prescription drugs. So that's why it's so important that you make sure that your prescription drug plan covers your prescription drugs so that you can take advantage of this $2,000 out-of-pocket cap. Thanks to the prescription drug law, there's also been an expansion of financial assistance through the Extra Help program. There are lots of people who have trouble paying their prescription drugs. And so if you make less than $23,000 a year or less than $31,000 as a married couple, you could be eligible for significant financial assistance that would decrease the cost of your drugs so that you're only paying $4.50 for a generic prescription and a little more than $11 for a brand prescription. So go to ssa.gov/extra help to see if you're eligible and to apply.
And what happens, doctor, if people miss that December 7th deadline?
Well, Audrey, this is why it's so important we're having this conversation today. Open enrollment is from October 15th to December 7th. If you miss the December 7th deadline, you may have to wait a full year until next year's open enrollment to find an option that works best for you. So coming back to what we were talking about, with the $2,000 out-of-pocket cap. If you end up having a prescription drug that's not covered by your plan, then you might have to wait a full year before you can take advantage of that $2,000 out-of-pocket cap with that prescription drug. So it's so important that you do not wait. Go now to Medicare.gov, 1-800-MEDICARE, or shiphelp.org to find the option that works best for your health and financial needs.
All right, guys, so lots of information, and if you are one of those more than 66 million people, it's time for you to start to review your prescription drug and health options and make changes to your current plan if you'd like to do that. My guest has been Dr. Meena Seshamani, Director, Center for Medicare for the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. Like I said, it's that time. Don't waste it. Doctor, thank you so very much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. There's more to come on Talk with Audrey after the break. A new national survey conducted by ApneaMed, a clinical stage pharmaceutical company focused on discovery, development, and commercialization of novel oral therapies for the treatment of obstructive sleep apnea and other sleep disorders, has revealed that obstructive sleep apnea has major personal, social, and mental health effects. Joining me today with the details on the sleep survey results, Dr. Seema Khosla, Medical Director at the North Dakota Center for Sleep, and Dr. Miranda Chappel-Farley, a sleep researcher living with obstructive sleep apnea. Welcome to both of you.
Thanks for having us.
Hi, thanks for having us.
Dr. Khosla, let me start with you. What's the difference between sleep apnea and obstructive sleep apnea?
So sleep apnea, we can think of it as a broader term. Obstructive sleep apnea is the most common kind of sleep apnea. And obstructive sleep apnea is where our airway collapses multiple times an hour, multiple times a night. And that causes our oxygen levels to fall. It causes our brain to wake up. And it really has important behavioral and emotional consequences.
The survey is called SHINE. Tell us more about that and obstructive sleep apnea's impact on someone's physical and mental health.
The SHINE survey was conducted to identify and explore these unseen psychosocial burdens and serious challenges faced by individuals living with obstructive sleep apnea. And we can see from the data that sleep apnea impacts multiple facets of physical and mental health. We see that respondents, about 67 of them, are concerned about these long-term health impacts. And about 14% reported a sleep-related motor vehicle accident within the last 12 months. We also see these serious mental health impacts too, with about 67% reporting feeling depressed and over half experiencing anxiety. So we see that obstructive sleep apnea, aside from having these long-term health impacts, does impact our mental health as well.
Dr. Chappel-Farley, you are living with obstructive sleep apnea. How has it impacted your life?
Yeah, I was diagnosed with obstructive sleep apnea at the age of 21, but I've actually experienced symptoms since I was a kid. I can remember at sleepovers, friends complaining about my snoring, and one friend even telling me that it sounded like I stopped breathing during the night. But this wasn't anything I had ever heard of, so I didn't bother telling my parents or my doctor. In college and high school, I really started to experience some of these cognitive impacts of sleep apnea, where I had a hard time focusing. I was extremely fatigued, stopping to get a triple red-eye coffee on my way to class each morning. And I was just all around struggling with my classes. And it wasn't until I actually fell asleep at the wheel of my car that I thought something might be wrong. As I mentioned, I got diagnosed at age 21 because serendipitously, my interest in neuroscience and memory led me to become a research assistant in a sleep lab. And that's actually where I first learned about sleep apnea and recognized the symptoms in myself.
Dr. Khosla, how are most people diagnosed? Do they go through the same sort of symptoms as Miranda did and then talk with their doctor? Or are they encouraged by their family and friends to seek help?
You know, we kind of laugh about it because so many times the diagnosis has already been made by the bed partner. And they come in and often patients will say, well, I'm here because my wife says I snore, or my husband moved out of the bedroom because of my snoring. And it's a little bit lighthearted, but they really have been encouraged by their family. Like the SHINE survey demonstrates, it isn't just the person living with obstructive sleep apnea that's impacted. It's the people in their orbit. It's the bed partner. It's the workmate. There's a lot of other people that experience the effects of obstructive sleep apnea.
And what's the process after you've been diagnosed? How are you diagnosed? Is there a sleep study that's part of the process?
No, you're exactly right. And so most people go into either their primary care physician, they go into their sleep doctor, and a sleep test is ordered. We can actually do them in the home now. And so some people will either do a home sleep apnea test, or they'll come into the lab to do what we call a polysomnography, which is the sleep study with all the wires and all of the data points that we collect. Once that data has been reviewed by a technologist and a physician, a report is generated, an interpretation is generated, and then there's a call back to the patient. So in our clinic, we have a lot of conversations about what kind of treatment do you think you would like to be on, right? It's important to recognize that sleep apnea doesn't just look like one thing, like Miranda has demonstrated. There's no one face of what sleep apnea looks like, and there's no one treatment option that is meant for everybody. And so it's really important to be able to personalize it and really understand our patients' lived experiences so that together we can find a treatment option that is effective and that they're willing to embrace.
What are some of the treatment options currently available, and what is ApneaMed working on?
Sure. So the traditional gold standard treatment is called CPAP, which stands for continuous positive airway pressure. And if we think about what happens with obstructive sleep apnea, that airway is collapsing multiple times. And so the CPAP is just air, and it just splints the airway open from the inside. We can also utilize a dental device, which pulls the jaw forward at night so that that airspace is bigger. There has been now a lot of inventive people, a lot of creative, very intelligent people coming up with new treatment options. There is an implantable device that stimulates your tongue to treat your sleep apnea. And there are medications now that are being evaluated to treat obstructive sleep apnea by opening up that airway. And that's one of the projects that ApneaMed is working on.
Dr. Chappel-Farley, what impact has treatment had on the quality of your life?
Since being diagnosed and getting treated, I would say that it's brought my vitality and motivation back. I struggled in college prior to getting diagnosed and treated, and after I felt like my classes were so much easier, and moreover, I actually enjoyed them. So I would encourage anyone who is potentially experiencing some of these symptoms to talk to their primary care provider, talk to their support systems, and help raise awareness for this disorder as well.
Dr. Khosla, if someone has obstructive sleep apnea, are they at risk for dying in their sleep?
Yeah, you're right. And that's one of the things that people are worried about, that they may pass away from obstructive sleep apnea. We know that sleep apnea is associated with a higher risk of stroke, of high blood pressure, heart disease. It's associated with diabetes. And just to show you how prevalent this is, there are more people living with obstructive sleep apnea than asthma and diabetes combined.
Absolutely, and it's an important issue that's probably affecting a lot of people. Where can we go for some more information?
If anyone wants to learn more about the survey results or read about the lived experiences of individuals with obstructive sleep apnea, you can visit osasurvey.com.
All right, everyone. If somebody close to you tells you that you're snoring and they can't stand it, you might need some help. So be sure to check with your doctor or your healthcare provider, and also check out that website so that you're more informed during your visit, so that you can advocate for yourself. Thank you both for joining me.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I'll be right back. You're watching Talk with Audrey. Welcome back. The cost of doing business, owning a home, or driving a car is increasing, and inflation isn't the only culprit. The misuse of the legal system, fueled by attorney advertising, frivolous lawsuits, and claims funded by financiers, has created a litigious culture that ultimately burdens every consumer in business with increased costs. Robert Hartwig is a clinical associate professor of risk management, insurance, and finance at the Darla Moore School of Business at the University of South Carolina and director of the school Center for Risk and Uncertainty Management. He joins me now to talk about the third-party litigation funding and legal system abuse and why households and businesses are increasingly paying for this abuse. Welcome.
Thank you, Audrey. Glad to be here.
So, litigation is impacting consumers.
Absolutely. It's really a hidden tax on every good and every service that every consumer in every state buys every day. It's really embedded in the price of everything. And when you step back and think about it, you see those trial lawyer billboards every couple miles along the highways. You see the advertisements on the TV. In fact, trial lawyers are spending over $2 billion a year on millions of ads to saturate the airways and the roadways all across America to get everybody to think that the first thing you should do is call a lawyer and sue. But there is a cost to that, and the cost of that is tremendous. It's somewhere around $400 billion annually, which is extraordinary. That amounts to about 3% of the economy's gross domestic product, or GDP. And if you bring that down to the household level, this is costing every household in America approximately $3,600 per year. And we talk about that, we characterize that as a litigation tax. It functions as a tax, and it drives up the cost of absolutely everything. And as you mentioned, Audrey, inflation's not the only factor driving up the prices out there. This is a hidden tax. Most people don't even realize what they're paying for when they pay for it.
Well, what can people do? Everyone sees billboards and hears advertisements across all forms of media, even online, right?
Right. Well, fortunately, there are some things, yes, that can be done. And there are a couple. For instance, we often see jury awards that are many times what actual economic damages were. In other words, everyone agrees that if someone is injured in an accident, they deserve to be compensated for their actual economic losses, their medical expenses, and so forth. But when we see awards that are, dozens of times, sometimes hundreds of times what the actual economic damages are, those are costs that are going into the system, and everybody is going to wind up paying for that. So reasonable caps would be appropriate. But again, we talked about the fact that there are what we call third-party investors now who actually invest in lawsuits. These aren't the plaintiff. These are not the defendant. These are individuals who are simply attempting to profit off of lawsuits in the United States. The average American is completely unaware of this, but investors have poured $15+ billion into investing in lawsuits over the past year. And that's an extraordinary number. It's growing rapidly, and it really needs to be fundamentally disclosed. When juries find out and when judges find out that there's a disinterested third party, only disinterested because they have nothing to do with the plaintiff or the defendant, they're only there to profit from the court case, that tends to, courts and juries and judges tend to react negatively to that when they see someone trying to profit from the woes of another. And so insurers and industries all across the country are advocating for mandatory disclosure in instances when there are these third-party investors involved. And we believe that would be one step that could be taken to rein in some of these what we call nuclear verdicts, enormous verdicts that we're seeing more frequently out there.
Where can we go, Robert, for more information?
Right. We recommend that you go to apci.org for more information about legal system abuse and what can be done about it.
Robert Hartwig, Clinical Associate Professor of Risk Management, Insurance, and Finance at the Darla Moore School of Business at the University of South Carolina, has been my guest. I'll tell you what, this has been a real eye-opener. Check out that website. And Robert, thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you.
There's more to come on Talk with Audrey. I'll be right back. Welcome back. Drone as first responder, or DFR technology, once a futuristic concept, is now revolutionizing emergency response. Joining me now to talk about how drones are being used in police forces across the country, Axon Air Strategist Vern Sallee. Welcome.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, I think we've all probably seen drones in the air in our communities, but tell us about drones as first responders and how it's being used.
Absolutely. I think a lot of people are seeing drones just like you talked about at the hobbyist level in the community. And it's essentially a camera in the sky to give you an entirely different viewpoint of whatever you might be interested in. And it's largely the same in policing and public safety, but it's used for, really resolving incidents and emergencies. And so police departments have been using drones for over a decade, but the concept of drone as first responders entirely new within the last 5 to 6 years or so, and really is accelerated in the last couple of years. And that's a pre-positioned drone that can get on scene to an emergency within 1 to 2 minutes, well before traditional ground units can get on scene. And that can be game changing in terms of the real-time situational awareness and intelligence that's given to officers so that they can actually have better tactics and strategies going into the call.
Do drones also have the capability to communicate with people on the ground?
Yeah, absolutely. So the drones can have a speaker on it, or also some indoor drones have both a speaker and a microphone, so you can have two-way communication. Just like a helicopter would do, where they're giving information out, perhaps for a missing person, a drone can do the exact same thing. It can give either a taped, speaker output, or it can be in real time with real-time instructions to somebody, maybe even telling a suspect to surrender. And police departments have had experiences with suspects actually surrendering to drones because they knew they could not get away from it.
Very interesting. And how does Axon come into this, and what role do they play?
Sure. Axon is a 30-year-old public safety technology company that, started with the taser, which I think a lot of people are really familiar with. But, perhaps they're not as familiar with Axon, but they might see it every day in terms of police body cam footage that they might see on TV. Much of that is through Axon. And Axon has become a major public safety technology company where we provide a variety of software and hardware services to our customers. And which is really leaning towards live streaming and real-time intelligence that's all correlated into a single pane of glass or single place where decision makers can see it. In policing, there's an emerging technology called real-time crime centers, where footage from drones, body cameras, fleet cameras, things like that can be all piped in so that it really gives a good idea to decision makers as to what's going on at the scene, and they can make decisions in real time. And if your viewers want to learn more, they can go to axon.com, drone as first responder.
You already gave us a couple of examples, but can you give us some other results that agencies have had by using DFR technology?
Sure. Real case scenarios are that agencies can avoid dispatching patrol units to about 20% of calls in some cases. And what that might look like is the drone actually gets on scene and to say a fight call or something and sees that the fight is broken up. These people are no longer in the area, and they can scan the area for a block or two, make sure nobody's injured or bleeding in the bushes or something, and then call back to the original reporting person and notify them, hey, we had responded with a drone and all these people are gone on arrival. So there are many, many calls that are sitting in the queue or the dispatch system of police departments that are just waiting for ground units to respond. Drones can clear many of those, which is critical because it can keep those other ground units free for higher level tasks to keep their communities safe.
Are fire departments also utilizing DFR technology?
Absolutely. Drone as first responder, it's not as adopted in fire departments as quickly, but at my former agency, Chula Vista PD, we would share footage with the fire departments. And it's really critical that some of these sensor systems on drones have thermal imaging. And so we could actually look at the roof of a burning building and see where the hot spots are so that firefighters, know where to suppress the fire, or also not send their firefighters on the roof into areas where there are hot spots and danger of collapse. So absolutely used very routinely by police and for fire. It's a critical technology.
And where can we go again for some more information?
Sure, Axon.com, drone as first responder, for more information.
Thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you very much.
And that's it for this week's show. I'm Audrey Adams. Join me here next week for more insightful, intelligent, and inspiring conversations and information to help you improve the quality of your life. It's all about the business of living. I'll see you next week.